Welcome back. It is time for another edition of Ask Mike. As always, our senior analyst, Mike Irwin, is here. I'm just actually joining in on this one. We're going to start out there. Our first question comes from Arkansas Redneck, and he wants to know, I heard that Arkansas football may soon be opening back up. When is that supposed to happen, and how will it work?
Okay, this is just a plan announced by Hunter Yurachek last week. The first thing that would happen is if the plan is put in place, on June the 1st, athletes would be allowed to come back. That means they could use the athletic facilities. And he said that was in line with what Governor Hutchinson did, where he opened up gyms, I think, last week, so they wouldn't violate that. And then the other idea is that after a period of where you do strength and conditioning to get back into shape, because these guys have not been working out, certainly not, they may have been working out on their own, but not like you would do if you were at school under a strength and training staff. So they go through a period of that, and then sometime around mid-July they would actually start workouts. And he didn't get specific on how that works. How much of that is with pads and shoulder pads? How much of it is just them showing you how to run plays or whatever? But that's the plan right now. And all 14 SEC schools would have to agree to that.
Well, Billy Bob Razorback, kind of a similar question. Yurachek has announced the date for football to start back up, but what about other SEC schools? Is Arkansas doing this on its own?
No, they're not doing it on their own, and the ADs meet 3 times a week, all 14 of them. And any plan you can have your own plan, like Arkansas has a plan. Right. But that plan only works if all 14 SEC schools agree to do it. And a bunch of them haven't announced their plans yet, so we'll see how that works out. But I think it's going to reflect what's going on in each individual state for those teams. It might not be possible to start that quickly. We'll see.
Well, 3SCORE10 asks, if practice begins on July 15th, will the incoming freshmen be allowed to practice at that time? And is there a time limit on how long they can practice? Yeah,
the COVID thing doesn't change normal NCAA rules. So if you graduated from high school and you meet all the NCAA academic standards, then you could come in and join the team just like you would any other summer. Now, we will know probably if some don't make that, because every year there might be 1 or 2 guys, there's a question about them or whatever, so we'd be able to report that. But yes, everybody that's eligible would be able to join the rest of the players. So what was the other part of that?
And is there a time limit on how long they can practice?
That's not clear. And the only thing I would say about that is whatever they decide, because I'm assuming they'll be under the normal 20 hours a week that's allowed by the NCAA, but that's for all activities. Well, how many times a week could you practice when you start up? How long would those practices last? An hour, 90 minutes, or whatever? That's something, again, that each one of those teams will have to agree to, and that hasn't happened yet.
Well, Smeyerhog says, I haven't ordered my season tickets yet. My wife says she doesn't know how safe it'll be to go to games with all those people so close together. I say they won't have games unless it's safe. Am I right?
Well, I think you're right. And after listening to Hunter Yurachek talk to Alicia Orange last Friday, and he laid out his case for what he would do, which is he talked about having more buses. So the people that come in on buses and park in the outlying lots, there would be more buses, so they might be half full instead of all full. He talked about when they line up to go in the gates, have people out there to socially distance them. He talked about having more points of sale at concession stands, so you have fewer people standing in line and you could manage that. He didn't talk a lot about what you do when you sit down in the stadium, because I don't know how you do that when you're right next to somebody, other than the fact that he said people will be required to wear masks, and he pointed out that they did that all the way back in 1918 with the Spanish flu, and there are pictures out there of fans doing that. So the bottom line on that question is I trust all of these ADs. They're not crazy people. They're not going to open this thing up for games unless they're certain that, or fairly certain that you'll be safe. There's no guarantees on anything, but I think if you feel like it's going to be safe, then they'll go ahead and open it up.
Pig's Feet is curious and says, can you explain how high school individual basketball rankings can move so much from publication to publication? KK Robinson moved up 40 spots to number 36 in 24/7's final rankings, but Devo dropped 41 spots. Seems like a huge shakeup and very little basketball being played right now.
Yeah, Devo, Devontae Davis. The explanation on that from Kevin McPherson, who's our expert on recruiting. is that he had to have knee surgery, had to get scoped sometime early last summer or whatever. He said it was midsummer before he could actually play. That's a big, heavy AAU time.
Yeah.
And apparently he just didn't play enough to impress these people. Why they waited so late to react to that, I'm not sure how that works. But he also told me that he feels like that on a lot of these internet recruiting services, what happens is they don't listen enough to their local people.
Yeah.
The national organization that runs those services, those guys will sit around and make rankings, and they don't necessarily agree with what the local guys say. And he also said, Kevin said, that Arkansas tends to get overlooked. They don't realize nationally the quality of basketball that's played in this state, and I agree with that. Arkansas is a much better basketball state than football state.
Yeah.
Better athletes, guys that go on, to play professional ball or whatever. This is a good state for high school basketball.
Bacon the Saddle again, another one. We heard that name last week as well.
Right.
The A&M athletic director is on record of saying that he wants all conference games on campus. Now, this doesn't bode well for the Southwest Classic in Dallas. The contract ends in 2024. Mike, do you think we make it to 2024? And do you think the Southwest Classic will continue with a non-conference opponent when the current contract ends?
It's not clear to me from that question if he's asking they want to move it to the campus this year because of the coronavirus. But if it is, I did contact somebody over at the U of A, and they said there's been no discussion of that. So I think they're planning to see that game played again in Arlington. It's actually Arlington, not Dallas. Now look, that contract, I think it will go through 2024 because I think Arkansas likes it. A&M doesn't like it, but it is a contract. After that, there seems to be little doubt that this will go back to being a campus-to-campus thing, home and home. And so what happens to the Southwest Classic? I think what happens to it is Arkansas likes playing that game in Dallas. Jerry Jones likes it. I think they'll start scheduling name non-conference opponents. Well, who would that be? It would be schools like Texas. How about OU? How about Oklahoma State? How about going up to the Big Ten? I mean, we got Notre Dame on the schedule this year. What if they had a Notre Dame come into Jerry World? ACC teams like those, especially those big NFL stadiums, the indoor things, and Jerry World's a great one. So it's a good trip for them. So I think Arkansas will be able to keep that Southwest Classic going.
Fans would still love that too, even if it wasn't A&M.
Sure.
Earl Campbell's Hot Links wants to know, will we win a conference game this year?
You know, I've been asked that before, and I will tell you that I'm learning more and more about this staff as time goes by. And you hear it from other coaches outside, sometimes even outside the SEC, because coaches know other coaches.
Yeah.
And what Sam Pittman is really getting credit for more and more these days as people start to look at who's on his staff, and I'm talking about other coaches, this is really a good staff that he's assembled. I think we've got very good reason to be optimistic, and I think they will win an SEC game. I think they'll win more than one. I'm not going to say who, but I do think they'll win more than one SEC game, at least two.
I think you're right as well. Lighthouse Harry says, you said last week it would probably be a recruiting violation for Coach Muss to make public one of his virtual tours that he shows to recruits. I get that, but could he make one for the fans only? Because I guess Lighthouse Harry and the rest of the COVID-captured horde would like to be shown a little love, is what he says.
all I can do is say that we'll pass that on. I don't know.
Right, we'll let him know.
I don't know how he will react to that, but I understand what you're asking. Just make a generic one that doesn't mention specifically what the school is going to do for this recruit. And maybe he'll go for it. I don't know. He puts a lot of stuff on the internet.
That is true.
Maybe he'll do that.
Maybe he's looking for the next idea, and we'll help him out with that one. Muskogee Hog fan says, some conferences and teams seem to be more determined to play this fall than others. Have you heard anything about SEC teams playing only each other or replace non-conference games with SEC teams not on the current schedule right now?
You know, when Hunter Yurachek talked about all this stuff last Friday with Alyssa Orange, he didn't mention that specifically.
Right.
But what he did say is we've got plans for just about everything. So the plan that's mentioned there would come into place, I think, if you had a bunch of schools, non-conference games, on the schedules of multiple SEC teams, and I'll use Arkansas as an example, the Notre Dame game, which is the second week in September. Let's say Notre Dame says, sorry, we're not playing football, or sorry, we're not going to start the season until October.
Yeah.
And you have that happen to several other SEC schools with their non-conference opponents. Then I think they've probably got a plan where, and here's what they would have to do, because this is tough. You can't just plug in teams. They would have to totally rework the schedule.
Yeah.
And then make all non-conference games SEC games with teams that aren't currently on your schedule, so they'd be teams from the other side of the division from you. And I think they could do it, but it would take some time to do that. So I think
it'd be pretty fun, though.
they're going to have to work something out and probably have it on paper in case they have to use it. But I don't think it's going to come down to that personally.
It's like he said, Hunter said that he's got, plan A, B, C, D. Just hope you don't run out of plans after that.
Exactly.
Playboard says, Musselman had a top 10 recruiting class. How do you see him adjusting to this influx of talent? And who do you see becoming bench warmers?
That's interesting. He made a statement during the season last year, when people started talking about he's only playing 7 guys, maybe 8, and he said, I like to do that. I always do that. I don't think he was being totally honest. I think what he was doing was he didn't want his players getting the idea that somehow they were handicapped by doing that.
Right.
So he wanted to act like, hey, I'm used to coaching that way. He's not recruiting the way he's recruiting to play 8 guys.
Yeah.
I mean, because if you do that, you're going to go get all these studs and then have some role players that every once in a while play. And that's not what he's doing. So I think what you're going to see in the future is maybe 10, 11 guys active in a game. They're not all going to be able to play 25, 30 minutes, but they'll be active in a game. And then as far as if he does that with all of these talented, the 4 that he's bringing in, plus those that he's obviously brought in, at least, are there 2 grad assistants now, or grad transfers?
Grad transfers.
And there might be another one or whatever, depending on how many of those come in. And then you've got guys that were already here that transferred, that sat out. Trying to sit here and predict who would become a bench warmer is tough.
Yeah.
Here's what I know about Eric Musselman. He bases everything on practice. And we saw some guys last year not play long stretches, didn't play much.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden they started playing. And it was because their practice habits got better, and it looked better to him, so he stuck them in the game. And I think that's what will happen moving forward.
Last question. Razorback in Nebraska says, seems like there's a lot of resistance to resuming sports. The Washington Post said that the coronavirus has shown all of us that we don't need sports as much as we thought. Well, I think we all saw that headline.
I didn't read that. No. I heard about it. I don't know who wrote it, but I assume it was an opinion piece. And that's that guy's opinion. I don't think he's right. Polls and surveys have shown over the years that only about 40% of Americans are real sports fans, which means most people aren't. They find other things to do, and that's fine. But 40% of America is still about 140 million people or whatever. So there's a lot of sports fans out there. Don't worry about it. If there are people out there saying, I'm not going to play, some people are just negative.
Yeah.
Other people are genuinely concerned, like we talked earlier about the guy's wife.
Yeah.
And they're afraid that in this rush to go back to having sports again, somebody will screw up, and then the virus will get bad again. I've already said I don't think that's going to happen. Then there are people that probably mix politics into this thing, and I don't know how that would work. I don't know whoever you plan to vote for. I don't know how you would think that not playing sports
would affect that
one way or the other. So who knows why people are negative about this thing. I only know why I'm positive.
Yeah.
Because I want them to play. But I do look for reasons why I think it will happen.
We all want sports back. I think everyone watching this probably wants sports back as well. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of Ask Mike. For Mike Irwin, I'm Tara Talmadge. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you back here on Monday next week.